What's going on, everyone? Something I've faced over the years, and a common theme that a lot of people ask me about is, what if you feel pain during exercise, or you're trying to exercise, you're trying to do low impact activities, swimming, walking. A lot of us with arthritis, with joint pain, are directed by doctors to just get exercising, try a low impact exercise. And a common theme can be you feel pain during the exercise. Even if you're walking, swimming, trying strength training, stretching, a lot of people feel maybe low back pain, pain in different areas of the body, extreme stiffness and tightness, and it can obviously make progressing these exercises very difficult. It can make you not want to exercise, especially for me. I have inflammatory arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, so sometimes exercise has led to not just pain during the exercise, but it's caused a flare, it's caused hip pain, it's aggravated sciatica. So this is something we want to be really careful about. We want to progress exercise without making things worse. We don't want to exercise and make joint pain worse, make symptoms worse. So one of the main questions I get asked is, what do I do, for example, if I'm trying to walk and I just feel excruciating low back pain? Maybe it comes on right away, maybe it comes on the next day. What if it comes on during the activity? You feel good for maybe 20 minutes and that low back starts to ache. So I want to talk about my own experiences trying to navigate this and the experiences of a lot of my clients around the globe with this. The first thing is that we want to check on is, especially if we're walking, we want to make sure we're loose enough. We want to make sure that our mobility is good, that we have a good warm-up. So even for a low impact activity, we want to check on the warm-up. For me, I've had periods of times where my low back just ached when I tried to walk in the morning, and because I'm stiffer and tighter in the morning, if I go for a walk without warming up, without doing mobility, I can really feel my low back pain. So the first thing I would check on is maybe add a warm-up before the walk, maybe add a mobility stretching routine, and not even just before the walk. You can try doing this outside of the walk. You can focus on 3 sessions for, say, 10 to 20 minutes a week of mobility, where you're just working on flexibility. Check on to see, is anything in my body tighter than others? So what happened to me is my hamstrings and calves are really tight in the morning. So when I walked, my low back would hurt, but also my calves were so tight, my hamstrings were so tight that was causing a lot of my low back pain. So what I did was I focused on mobility for those specific areas. So I would do a mobility routine for the calves, for the hamstrings before the walk. Just take a couple minutes just to loosen those things up, and that's what really helped me. So see if anything in particular is really tight. Maybe it's just one area of the body. Sometimes those compensations can lead to pain in the body while we're doing that certain type of exercise. So first, focus on mobility. Again, you can work on a routine outside of the walk a couple times a week and see if increasing your mobility can just help with that, or you can work on that warm up before the walk. So that's the first thing I would check on. Number 2, and is going to be getting back to the compensations. If we have an area in the body that's maybe underactive or is maybe working too hard, and we start developing these compensations, I see this a lot when we walk, that if someone's core maybe is underactive, they're not doing enough core training, their low back can take a lot of the pounding when they're walking. Same thing if our flexibility isn't there. If our hamstring flexibility isn't there, then our low back can take a lot of the load, or the hips can take a lot of the load. And this can be related to really any part of the body. So the second aspect is going to be, it's so important to strength train. We want to strength train the whole body. We want a nice routine where we're focused on building muscle in the whole body. But specifically, if you're dealing with arthritis, joint pain, there might be certain areas that are more underactive than others. So there's certain areas that it's hard to activate. They're not as fired up as other parts of the body. Say the mid back is feeling a little more weaker than the rest of the body, or like I was talking about, the core, maybe the hip flexor. So strength training routine, but also seeing if you have any areas of the body that are a little more underactive that you need to strength train more. So for me in particular, a couple areas I've struggled with was the hip flexor. And I had to really pinpoint this area to help with the low back, because my hip flexors were so weak that, again, my low back was taking a lot of the pounding when I was walking, and I just didn't have that support from the rest of the body. So My second tip is we want full body strength, but let's check on everything to see if you have any compensations in the body, and you want to train that area a little more than others. And to go along with the second tip is, before a walk, you might even want to do a couple of strength training moves, and not just to increase your strength, but just to activate some of these areas. So second tip is, maybe before the routine, you focus on some of these areas that are a little more underactive. For me, I talked about my hamstrings being tight, my hip flexors being a little weaker. My mid back is an area that can get really stiff and tight. So maybe I'm going to grab a resistance band and do some pull aparts. I'm not going to overdo this because this is kind of separate from my strength training routine, but maybe I need to activate some areas, especially the core, before you go for a walk. We want to make sure the core is active to protect that low back. Maybe you have a big arch in the low back. Maybe you're rounded forward a little bit. So focus on areas where we're focused on the compensations, we're focused on getting the core going, and maybe that activation can really help you. So there's a couple things we can look at before the walk: strength training, a couple movements, stretching, a couple movements. My third tip is going to be, maybe we need to look at the particular exercise. Maybe it's just too much. So maybe you go for a walk, 30 minutes feels good. When you get to 35 minutes, 40 minutes, your low back starts to ache. Or some folks, they really have trouble even after 10 minutes. Whatever that duration is, let's reduce the duration a little bit and see what happens. Let's even go 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 20 minutes if 25 minutes causes low back pain. Maybe it's the amount, maybe it's just too much on the body, and maybe we want to progress it a little slower. So, and I really think this is important to put this to use for any amount of time. If you're someone that you're trying to get going on a routine, and maybe it's the elliptical or the bike or swimming or walking, and even just a couple minutes, maybe it doesn't feel right, even just reducing the duration can be very helpful. So don't underestimate that, and don't underestimate reducing the duration, going for a couple minutes, and trying that out for a couple weeks before you progress it, to make sure you keep responding well to the activity. So maybe it's just too much. Maybe you have to reduce it. That's tip number 3. Tip number 4 is going to be, maybe our form during the type of exercise is off a little bit. So if you're walking, your core is not is activated. Maybe you're arching your low back when you're walking. Maybe you're hunched forward a little bit when you're walking. So one thing to think about is, we want to think about form. Now, with walking, maybe we want to keep some tension in the core. We want to keep the abs tight, the glutes squeezed just a little bit. You're not going to really tense up your whole body as much as you can. But maybe we think about tensing up some different areas in the body. The core, we want to maybe bring the shoulders together and get a little activation in the upper body. So maybe we want to think about posture a little bit. We want to think about our form, and this obviously can relate to strength training, where maybe our form's off alignment a little bit, and that could be leading to putting more stress on some of these areas. And if you're thinking about form, if you're thinking about the core, maybe you start with, again, a shorter duration where you can see if it makes a difference. Oh, maybe I wasn't tensing my abs enough. Maybe my low back was taking a lot of the pounding. So some of those things to think about, right? So pain during exercise, again, I'm going over a lot of different things because everyone's so drastically different, and a lot of different things can cause this. But this is where I think that a good exercise routine really incorporates everything, because we could have some areas where we're limited a little bit. Strength training, stretching, cardiovascular health. I think it's important to do everything, because sometimes our strength training can affect walking. Sometimes our stretching routine can affect strength training. I think if you have compensations in the body, these things can lead to pain sometimes during whatever activity you're choosing. So my last tip that I want to say, tip number 5, is going to be, try different methods. Sometimes a movement just isn't best for you at this current period, and you need to do other things first. Again, for me, I've gone through periods of feeling low back pain when I walk, so I've focused more on strength training, maybe ease off the walking for now, and then keep checking on it. Or I like choosing different forms of cardio. The elliptical I love, because you can kind of think about form. You can think about a little more stability for the body. You can think about going at a different pace, and again, you have a little more support with the elliptical. Some people really enjoy the bike, and maybe building those things up first can help other areas of fitness. I talk a lot about this with strength training, where when I was lifting too much weights, I was not focused enough on form. I was putting too much stress on my low back. When I was doing too much deadlifting and squatting, a little bit was good for me, but the best things for me actually became kind of working on these compensations like I've talked about. So using a lot of machines. Again, I was talking about that hip flexor strength, hamstring strength, using a lot of machines, being really focused, really slow controlled. I love machines because you can really focus in, especially for arthritis and joint pain. We can really focus on engaging the core. When I was trying to really work my back strength up, I really wanted to use machines so I could really focus on that area that I was working on. So machines have been a great tool. Resistance bands have been a great tool. So I've always looked towards different methods. And, this can be complex because there's so many things we can look at, but over time you can get a little more understanding of what your body responds well to and what are maybe some things you want to avoid. So number 5 is going to be try different things. There's always maybe a different way to put together the exercise, like I've been talking about. Maybe we add more of a warm-up, stretching, maybe more of a cool down, stretching after the activity. I didn't really get into the cool down because we were talking more about pain during the exercise, but if you're feeling pain the next day after exercise, if you're feeling a lot of soreness the next day, that's where a good cool down can be really important. Even if after something like walking, if you're feeling just a lot of soreness after, a cool down where you're working on static stretches, where you're holding stretches for say 30 seconds to 60 seconds with a little tension, just so you're easing down these muscles. So lastly, there's so many ways we can kind of put together this routine. I went over a lot of different things today, but the idea is everyone's so drastically different. Let's look at some different areas, look at compensations in the body, warm up, cool down, form, reducing the duration. So many different ways to do it. I've had to change these things over the years because things can change. So I'm always trying to look at how am I responding to the activity I'm doing. It's so important for arthritis and joint pain. And once we figure that out, we can work on progressing these things. We can work on, and I really think we can progress everything. It just has to be put together the right way. Hope that's helpful. Let me know in the comments, are you someone that gets pain when you exercise, even with low impact exercise? Have you had a hard time figuring this out? Let me know if these tips are helpful. Also, let me know what's helped you over the years. Are you someone that used to have pain when they worked out and you kind of found the right approach for you? Let me know in the comments. See you next time.